Hello, and thank you for joining me. Today, we're returning to Fallout 76, where we're going to spend another 1,000 scrip with the Purveyor on 3-star ranged legendary weapons. And as always, I'll take a few moments to talk about each one, about what makes it good, bad, or mediocre. And this week, we actually have a Purveyor sale going on, so we'll get a few extra pulls here today. So let's get started and see what we can get. So for our first roll, we got a Hunter's Minigun with bashing damage increased by 50% and plus 250 damage resistance while reloading. So the Hunter's effect is one of the less useful of the Slayer's effects in my opinion, just because I don't think there's going to be a lot of times where most players are going to be running around hunting animals specifically. Yeah, you might go hunt down a Deathclaw or something like that for the Scrip challenge, for the scoreboard, not the Scrip challenge, once in a while, but I don't know that most players are going to find it worth keeping an extra weapon around specifically for that, especially not one as heavy as a minigun. The second effect, bashing damage increased by 50%. Normally that is a terrible effect. It's pretty much worthless on most weapons. The one big exception being the minigun. If you put a shredder mod on the minigun, the bashing damage increased by 50% turns the weapon into a pretty solid melee weapon if you have no 5mm ammo. So that's definitely good here. Unfortunately, the Hunter's effect is definitely not the effect I would want for the first star. I would take, anything from anti-armor, aristocrats, bloody, junkies, even mutants, for example, but Hunters is just not really ideal, but at least you're getting that second star. I'm not sure if I'll keep this one around for that or not. I do have a better minigun that has bashing damage. I think it's mutants. It's not amazing by any means, but it is a minigun with bashing damage. The third effect, plus 250 damage resistance while reloading. I'm not a big fan of that effect just because, well, for several reasons. For one, if you are running at least armor that has at least, 300 to 400 damage resistance, then you're not going to be seeing a lot of protection bonus from that damage resistance. You will get some extra, but you're definitely going to be seeing diminishing returns. And second of all, it's not energy resistant, so it definitely loses something there. The idea is that you'd be protected while you're vulnerable, while you're reloading, but with a weapon like this, you can definitely reload between battles, and you're, in most cases, except for maybe boss battles or things like that, you're going to have enough ammo to clear an area before you really need to reload. So, and if you're using it as a melee weapon with the Shredder mod for the bashing damage effect, then you're never going to be reloading, so that third star does nothing at all. So this one's kind of somewhat interesting, pretty mediocre just because of the ability to use it with the Shredder mod, but even then it's definitely not one of the better miniguns for that, so overall, not great. Let's see what else we can get. Okay, well, it's minigun day apparently. So we've got a Mutants Slayers minigun with replenishing action points with each kill and plus 50 damage resistance while aiming. So the Mutants Slayers effect is definitely more useful in my opinion than a lot of the other Slayers effects, just because there definitely are times where most players will be going out and actively hunting down super mutants. If you're looking to grind some experience, you're probably going to be hitting West Tech at some point, so that right there is a good place to do it. And super mutants are not the squishiest enemies around by any means, so keeping a weapon around specifically for them is not always a bad idea. It'd be nice if it weighed a little bit less. I don't know that a minigun is necessarily the weapon you're going to want to keep around for that, but in principle, it's not a terrible idea. The replenishing action points with each kill it's a great effect in my opinion, but it's not really going to be doing a whole lot for you here, I don't think, because the minigun fires so quickly that it's going to chew through your action point pool if you are using it in VATS very, very quickly. So I just don't see the replenishing action points with each kill effect being able to keep your AP pool high enough to actually keep using this thing in VATS very much. On the other hand, if you do a lot of sprinting and you have trouble keeping enough AP on hand to sprint, or you're using dodgy or things like that, then it could end up being some benefit to you. I think the explosive or faster fire rate or something like that would definitely be a better star on a weapon like this, but I could see it at least having some value there. The plus 50 damage resistance while aiming, it's probably better than the damage resistance while reloading effect. It still suffers from the issue of diminishing returns if you've got decent armor already, and for most players, certainly not everyone, but a lot of players anyway, if you're running a heavy weapon such as a minigun, then you're probably going to be running power armor for the stabilized perks so that you can get some armor penetration with your heavy gun there. So, not to mention that you don't have stealth for protection, so getting some protection from your power armor and things like that is a good thing when you're running a heavy weapon. So most power armor is obviously going to have damage reduction or damage resistance in the pretty high ranges, so I don't see where you're going to get a whole lot of benefit from that effect for most players on a weapon like this. It's probably, like I say, better than the while reloading, because on a weapon like this, even I tend to aim down the sights a fair bit. If you hip fire it more, then you might not get a whole lot, but I tend to aim fire when I'm not using VATS, so it's just the way I play, and if you're that same type of player, then it is free damage resistance. It's just not going to do a whole lot. So overall, this one's not exciting. I think I talked about it enough. Let's see what else we can get. And here we've got a 2-shot M79 grenade launcher with replenishing action points with each kill and 90% reduced weight. So the 2-shot effect is normally not one of my favorite effects, just, well, for a couple reasons. Because, for one, it divides the damage of the weapon that it shows on the damage card up between 2 different projectiles evenly, and each one of those projectiles have to penetrate the armor, or the armor of the target independently. So that is definitely a drawback. And additionally, the 2-shot effect imposes a significant accuracy penalty on the weapon, which is also a big drawback. And the only real benefit you're getting in most cases is plus 25% base damage to the weapon. That makes it pretty bad in my opinion, but with explosive weapons, it is a bit better because each one of the explosions, as I understand it, gets the full explosive damage. So on a weapon like this, the 2-shot effect could be very good. The replenishing action points with each kill, I don't know that that's going to be that useful on a weapon like this. You can certainly use this weapon almost exclusively in VATS, but if you drop out of VATS between shots when you're reloading the weapon, then there's a good chance that you're not going to ever run out of AP just from using the weapon, at least if you have your build set up right and have the right gear and things like that. So it's probably not doing a whole lot for you, although it might do something. The one thing to keep in mind though with the launcher weapons like this is that if you're using VATS and you miss your target in VATS with the weapon, it's possible the projectile will just go off into non-existence and you won't get your explosion at all. So I'm not saying don't do that. It's still a perfectly viable strategy. It's just something you'll want to be aware of that could happen. And the 90% reduced weight, on a weapon like this, that's great because this is definitely the kind of weapon that you could just keep around to fire off the extra 40mm grenades that you end up with in your inventory from time to time without having to just drop them, maybe have a little bit of fun doing it, but it's probably not the kind of weapon that you would normally want to keep as your day-to-day farming weapon, for example, or probably not even your boss fighting weapon. So, you know, having 90% reduced weight just for those times when you feel like having a little bit of fun with that ammo you picked up is great. So overall, this one's kind of interesting, pretty mediocre, but not the worst. Let's see what else Murmur has for us. And here we've got another 2-shot effect, this time on a snub-nosed 44 pistol with plus 50% fast hit chance and 15% faster reload. So the 2-shot effect is definitely worse on this weapon than it was on the grenade launcher just before, because there's no explosive effect on this weapon. It does not have the explosive legendary effect, and it's not natively explosive. So it's basically suffering from all the drawbacks that I talked about there without any of the real benefits that the other weapon had. So that's pretty bad. The plus 50% VATS hit chance, that does kind of offset a lot, although certainly not all, of the two-shot penalty. So that is a benefit, and you're probably going to be wanting to use VATS with a pistol in most cases just to get some extra damage, because pistols do tend to be a bit underpowered compared to most other weapon types. So being able to reliably target the weak points and get some extra damage from the VATS criticals is definitely going to help you out. And then the 15% faster reload, unfortunately, that is probably not doing as much as we all hope or wish that it would be doing. If you've got the Speed Demon mutation, the benefit from it is not zero, but it's pretty negligible. So since most players, I think, at least in the end game, are going to be having the Speed Demon mutation, if nothing else just because it's fun to run faster, then I don't think it's really doing a whole lot for us. If you don't have that mutation, then it is a very good effect, and would, in that particular case, would probably be the best effect on this weapon. So overall, pretty mediocre here. Let's see what else we can get. Okay, I was wrong. It's not minigun day, it's two-shot day. So here we've got a two-shot harpoon gun with replenishing action points with each kill and 25% less VATS AP cost. So we talked about the two-shot effect. There's no explosive on this weapon, not natively and not from the legendary effect, so it's suffering pretty much purely from the drawback. One thing to keep in mind is that the base weapon damage on this weapon is a bit higher than it is on, say, the 10 mil, actually quite a bit higher, but so the amount of damage that we'll get through armor on this weapon is going to be better than it is on the 10 mil, even when you cut that damage in half. So that probably makes it a little bit better than the 10 mil in this regard. The replenishing action points with each kill, it synergizes very well with the third star. This weapon is another one of those that you could definitely use in VATS almost exclusively, but I don't know that you really need that second star to keep your AP pool full if you've spec'd properly for it. On the other hand, if you are spec'd in another way and just kind of want to mess around with a weapon like this in VATS, then that second star could definitely help keep you going in VATS much more effectively, especially when combined with the 25% less VATS AP cost. So this one is kind of interesting. Again, I'm going to put it on probably the lower side to mid side of mediocre. Definitely nothing exciting, but kind of interesting to talk about at least. So let's see what else Murmur has for us. And here we've got an Aristocrat's Combat Shotgun with plus 25% damage while aiming and 90% reduced weight. So the Aristocrat's effect is probably king of the hill for full health builds as far as damage bonus goes, because it'll give you plus 50% damage with no debuffs. You don't have to suffer from any addictions or anything like that. You don't even have to have mutations, although I think most players in the endgame will, at least Marsupial and Speed Demon and probably a few others, but you don't have to have any of those to benefit from the Aristocrat's effect. You just have to have 32,000 caps in your character's pocket at the time. So that may sound like a lot to a new player, and if you're still going around and buying all kinds of plans and resources and whatever from the vendor robots, then it will be very difficult to keep that amount of caps on your character. And similarly, if you're buying, high-ticket items and things like that from player vendors, it could also be a challenge. But for many late-game players who have already bought most of the things that they care about from the robot vendors and have most of the legendary items that they really care about, keeping 32,000 caps on their character is a very easy and trivial thing to do. So it's just plus 50% damage for doing exactly that. The plus 25% damage while aiming, well, for me, I wouldn't actually get a whole lot of effect out of that on this particular weapon, because shotguns I typically use almost exclusively in VATS. It's just the way I play. But if you're the type of player who would prefer to aim a shotgun down sights, then this is potentially a very good shotgun right here, because it's giving you plus 50% damage from the Aristocrat's effect and another 25% damage from the second effect anytime that you're aiming down the sights. So that's very powerful. And then 90% reduced weight. Not necessarily the third star that I would ideally want to see here, but it's definitely a solid one. It is worth keeping in mind that the mods that you put on the weapon will not benefit from the 90% reduced weight, so it's not going to stay as light as it is, but it's still nice to have less weight to carry around. So anyway, this one's actually pretty solid. Definitely on the lower side of good, but I'd say it's good. So let's see what else we can get. And here we've got a Nocturnal short gamma gun with bashing damage increased by 50% and 25% less VATS AP cost. So the Nocturnal effect is not nearly as bad as it used to be, just because they did finally remove the debuff during the day. You know, there's no reason that a legendary effect that is supposed to make something better is actually making it worse, so that seemed kind of silly. It should be bad enough that it's just not giving you any benefit at all during the day, and that's exactly what it does now. So that's a good thing. Unfortunately, I'm not the type of player who will remember to switch weapons based on in-game day and night, so the Nocturnal effect is definitely not my ideal choice. I think there are some ways that Bethesda could add some like perk or legendary perk or something support to make the Nocturnal effect much more interesting, but they have not done so, and so for me it's just not doing a whole lot, although the damage bonus on it is pretty solid. So if you are the type of player who would remember to switch weapons based on in-game day and night, then it could be a good choice for you. Although probably not this particular one, because this one has bashing damage as the second star, which, as we talked about earlier with the minigun, is not good on anything but a minigun, so it's basically like not having a second star at all here. The third star is, in my opinion anyway, the best star on this weapon with 25% less VATS AP cost. I'm a VATS junkie, so I like weapons that have the less VATS AP cost, as long as it's a weapon that I would normally use in VATS, and this is definitely that kind of a weapon. So overall, this one is, I would classify it as pretty bad. I could see some players getting some use out of it, but really, it's just not that good. So let's see what else Murmur has for us. And here we've got a Zealous pipe bolt action pistol with plus 50% damage to Scorched, replenish action points with each kill, that one's a popular one today, and 25% less VATS AP cost. So the Zealot's effect is, I don't know, kind of mediocre, I guess I would say, as far as the Slayer's effects go, just because you don't really need a whole lot of extra damage to take down your typical Scorched, just because they're pretty squishy to begin with, and they'll usually go down pretty quickly with even a non-legendary weapon if you've got even a half-decent build. So it's not exciting in that regard, but it does work against Scorch Beasts and the Scorch Beast Queen, so it does have some utility there, which makes it better than it otherwise would be. So still not something I would really, keep this particular weapon around for, because you're going to want something probably with a higher fire rate and therefore a higher DPS, damage per second, so that you can, get some good damage on the Queen and make sure you get your share of the rewards. So yeah, the replenishing action points with each kill, this one, it's kind of like the grenade launcher, where if you are dropping out of, if you've got a decent VATS build and you've got a good amount of AP to work with in your pool, then if you drop, it has a low enough clip size that if you drop out of VATS when you're reloading and your AP, you've got enough buffs and things like that to keep your AP regen happening quickly, then you probably don't need the second star, even if you are using this weapon almost exclusively in VATS, which I certainly would. And the third star does synergize very well with that second star, with helping keep you using this weapon almost exclusively in VATS, although that third star really makes it even more to me feel like the second star is not going to be doing a whole lot for you. So this one is kind of solid, I guess, if you want to do the sniper thing with either a pistol version or a rifle version and don't want to use the hunting rifle modded out. But overall, it's definitely on the maybe higher side of bad or lower side of mediocre. So let's see what else, if we can get something better here. Well, this one, I don't know if it's really better, but maybe a little bit. we've got an exterminator's short Western revolver with plus 25% damage while aiming and 25% less VATS AP cost. So the exterminator's effect is probably the worst of the Slayer's effects in my opinion, just because there's not going to be a lot of times in the game typically where you're going to be going out and actively hunting down bugs or mirelurks. Sure, if you're still grinding out reputation with the raiders, you may be going out and killing mirelurks to take some meat to Ohio River adventures every day, but is it really worth keeping a specific weapon around only for that? I think for most players the answer to that question is no, so it's just not going to be doing a whole lot for most players. The plus 25% damage while aiming, I talked about that before. It's excellent if you are the type of player who would aim this type of weapon down the sights. I'm really not. I would use this weapon almost exclusively in VATS and try to get some extra damage from targeting those weak points and the VATS critical hits. So for me, it's not doing a whole lot, although on other types of weapons it certainly does, primarily heavy weapons that I don't typically use VATS with. The 25% less VATS AP cost is definitely, in my opinion, the best star on this weapon. It will keep you churning through VATS. Unfortunately, it does not synergize well with the second star, so this is kind of one of those weapons that it's versatile because it's good for if you want to aim it down the sights or use it in VATS, at least for the second and third stars. The first star is still not any good really, but I would generally prefer a weapon that's a bit more focused. So either something that's going to help me while I'm aiming or reload or something like that, or a VATS focused second star, or something that will be useful while I'm using VATS, so that way you're getting your benefit no matter what you're doing there. But I think I kind of went off a little bit there, but let's go on ahead and move on to the next one. And here we've got a Ghoul Slayer's light machine gun with bullets exploding for area damage and faster movement speed while aiming. So the Ghoul Slayer's effect is, I don't know, we're getting all the Slayer's effects here. I guess I would put it kind of mediocre because most of the time you don't really need a lot of extra damage to take down ghouls. They're generally pretty squishy to begin with. Sure, the big ones are a bit of a tank sometimes, but even then a few shots from a non-legendary weapon will typically take them down pretty quickly if you've got a decent build. So I don't feel like it's really worth keeping a weapon around specifically for ghouls. And it's also lost a little bit of stock with the change from West Tech being just a public area to being an instanced area, because everybody can grind it. There's always going to be super mutants there for you, at least the first time you log on the server and go in there and kill them. And then if you're bored and want to do some more West Tech grinding, you can always hop to another server and do it again. So it eliminates the need to go find ghouls like you used to, because ghouls were always a good option for leveling, like at the White Spring Golf Club or the Charleston Capitol building or places like that. But with the ability to just grind West Tech, which is much better experience for the super mutants, I just don't think the Ghoul Slayer's effect is nearly as desirable even for that as it used to be. The bullets exploding for area damage is, on many weapons, the best available second star, and that's probably the case with this weapon, although faster fire rate would also be very good on this weapon, but it's just straight extra damage, and it doesn't interfere with anything of the other stars. Like if it was a furious effect, then the bullets exploding for area damage might be a little bit of an issue, but that is not the case here, so that's great. And then faster movement speed while aiming. If you've got the Speed Demon mutation, as we've talked about before, then this effect also is not going to do anything at all for you. If you don't, then it does what it says, but even then, you're probably not going to get a whole lot out of it, just because you're probably not going to be running around the battlefield holding down the aim button all that frequently. So, maybe some players do, but I think most players probably don't. So, overall, this one is something I could see maybe a mid-level or low-level player using until they got their hands on something better, just because of the explosive effect. But overall, it's not exciting. So let's see what else Murmur has for us. And here we've got another two-shot weapon. This time a two-shot short gamma gun with 25% faster fire rate, and your VATS critical meter filling 15% faster. So we've talked about the two-shot effect extensively already. All of that I've talked about applies here, so we're just going to move on. The faster fire rate is actually going to be very good on this weapon because, if I remember correctly, this weapon actually uses I believe they're the Pistolier perks, the Gunslinger, that's what it is, the Gunslinger perks that are for semi-automatic weapons, but that it actually fires fully automatic. It's kind of unique, kind of like the Plasma Flamer with the Flamer mods that do the same thing. They use the Rifleman perks or the Gunslinger perks, depending on how you have it modded out, whether rifle or pistol, but they fire fully automatic. So that's a way that a Gunslinger build or a Rifleman build can get in some extra damage through DPS there in situations where their slow, steady fire is not really doing what they want it to do. So that's kind of an interesting thing there. And then the 25% faster fire rate, back to what I was getting, the reason I brought all of that up, is that it's just going to increase the damage per second even further on this weapon, and that's a great thing. The VATS critical meter filling 15% faster. Well, this is definitely the kind of weapon that you could use almost exclusively in VATS if you've got a good VATS build, so having your critical meter fill faster is definitely going to get you some more criticals. And with the changes to crits that Bethesda made in the Test Your Metal update, this third star may be even more useful than it used to be, so that's a good thing. Really, the worst star on this one, in my opinion, is the first one, the two-shot, but even that isn't enough to really drag it down too far. I'd say it's pretty mediocre because of that, but it could be actually very good if it had had a better first star, unfortunately. So let's see what else Murmur has for us. We've got a couple more polls here. And here we've got a Vampire's Pipe Revolver with 25% faster fire rate and plus 250 damage resistance while reloading. So the Vampire's effect is one of my favorite effects, but it's definitely not as good on semi-automatic weapons as it is on fully automatic weapons or shotguns, or things that can basically hit a higher number of times in the same amount of time than semi-automatic weapons, because each time you hit, you trigger the Vampire's effect for regeneration, which is great, but it's always the same amount of regeneration. It doesn't matter if your shot does 1 point of damage or 1,000 points of damage or whatever, it's doing the exact same amount of regeneration on that Vampire's effect. So because of that, it's not quite as good on this weapon as it could be. But even so, there are times when even semi-automatic users are probably going to be wanting to use the Vampire's effect, especially if you're a bloodied build, just to try to help yourself stay alive. So I can definitely see this weapon being useful. The 25% faster fire rate, on a lot of semi-automatic weapons, it doesn't do a whole lot. If the weapon without that effect lets you fire as quickly as you can pull the trigger, then you're really not going to be getting anything from that effect. But on semi-automatic weapons that don't fire as quickly as you can pull the trigger, if there's actually a delay, such as in this weapon, then it will actually increase your fire rate and therefore your damage per second, so it's a good thing. And then the 250 damage resistance while reloading, well, we had that before, and we talked about it before. This weapon will probably be reloading pretty quickly, or frequently rather, because it's not going to have a very large magazine size, no matter how you mod it out. So because of that, you might get a little bit more stock out of that third effect, but still, it's going to be suffering from the diminishing returns effect and the fact that it does not give you any additional protection against energy damage, fire damage, poison damage, anything like that. So overall, this one's kind of interesting. I'd put it maybe on the higher side of mediocre, because the Pipe Revolver is actually one of the better pistols in the game for gunslingers, because unlike all of the other revolvers in the game, you can put a silencer on this one, or a suppressor, sorry, so you can use it in stealth, which makes it potentially the most powerful revolver in the game, at least in my opinion. So this one's definitely somewhat decent, at least. So we'll do 2 more polls here and see what Murmur has for us today. And here we've got a Ghoul Slayer short combat rifle with 25% faster fire rate and 15% faster reload. So this one would be an excellent weapon, at least as far as combat rifles go, if it had a better first star. The first star is not terrible. There's definitely times when you'll get use out of it, but there's just not nearly as many times as I talked about before where you're going to be hunting down ghouls specifically like you used to before Westac became instanced. So that's unfortunate, and the combat rifle, its damage is noticeably lower than both the handmade and the fixer, so it's kind of considered a second tier rifle. It's not terrible. You can definitely do fine with it and, you know, do some good damage, be able to solo things and be fine, but it's definitely not the top tier rifle. The 25% faster fire rate, that's great on this weapon. If you're using it semi-automatic, it's probably not going to do a whole lot for you because this weapon will generally fire as quickly as you can pull the trigger. But if you do mod it out to be a fully automatic weapon, then it's going to give you a significant boost in damage per second there. So that's great. The 15% faster reload, once again, if you have the speed demon mutation, it's not doing a whole lot for you. But if you don't, then that's a great third star. So this weapon I could definitely see being good for, you know, a low to mid-level player who hasn't gotten their hands on something better. And I could see them getting a lot of good use out of it, even, you know, especially if they don't have the speed demon mutation yet, things like that, until, you know, they get their build put together properly, get, you know, better geared up, things like that. So I might put this one on my vendor for cheap just for that reason. But let's see, one last poll here. Let's see what Murmur has for us today. And here we've got a Berserker's short radium light rifle with plus 50% VATS hit chance and 90% reduced weight. So the Berserker's effect, kind of like the Nocturnal effect, is not as bad as it used to be because they removed the debuff for having armor. You just don't get the bonus for if you have too much damage resistance, which is hardly any damage resistance at all. So, you know, don't think you're going to run around with, you know, a good chunk of damage resistance and get just a little bonus from it. That's really not going to work for you. What you can do if you want to is equip a set of legendary armor and then let it get broken so that it's not providing any damage resistance for you. But you'll still get the benefit from the legendary effect on it so long as you never take it off. If you ever put it back on, or if you ever want to put it back on, you'll have to repair it first. So something to keep in mind there. But it is a way you can kind of work around that if you want to do a Berserker's build. But overall, the Berserker's build is just really missing a few key pieces that it needs to be strong and interesting the way Bloodied is, unfortunately. So it'd be nice if Bethesda would put a few of those pieces in there, because it would be nice if it could actually compete, and it would be interesting to see a bunch of Berserkers running around out there. But as it is, I don't think that's something we're going to see anytime soon, if ever. The second star, plus 50% VATS hit chance. On a weapon like this, that's really one of my favorite stars or effects, because like I say, I'm a VATS junkie, and I would use a weapon like this almost exclusively in VATS. And that's basically just going to ensure that I hit more of my shots that I am almost always targeting the weak points on. So that's going to be a damage boost, as well as it's also a little bit of a range boost, because that bonus will offset some of the VATS accuracy penalties once you're firing at targets outside of the weapon's range. You will still see the damage drop off outside of that range, but you'll at least have a better chance of hitting them, and that's sometimes useful enough in itself. The 90% reduced weight, I don't think that's that useful on this weapon, because rifles and pistols, but rifles especially, have a lot of mods for them. And once you mod a rifle out, and you're just going to be seeing a weight that I think is going to be typically around half the weight of a modded out rifle, equivalent rifle without the 90% reduced weight effect. So it feels like a lost effect, and there are definitely ones that I think would be better, especially 25% less VATS AP cost, but there are others as well. So overall, we didn't really get anything super exciting this week, but we did get some that were kind of interesting to at least talk about and, you know, have a look at. So it wasn't a total loss, and we'll be back next week to try it again. Please remember, if you enjoy my content, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel out, and it doesn't cost any money. And until next time, thank you for watching.